Sometimes the hardest part of being a father is knowing your child has stopped listening. Evan Marks felt that silence every single day. At 49, he worked double shifts at the shipyard while his teenage son drifted further away. When his eccentric great-uncle died and left him a rusted submarine on a forgotten beach, his family laughed. They called it junk, but Evan walked inside anyway. What he found changed everything. Old maps, sealed letters, and recordings from a war-long past revealed family secrets no one had spoken about in decades. The submarine became his quiet refuge, a place where the past helped him understand his present. Could these forgotten pieces of history show him how to reach his son again? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Share. The alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning, same as always. Evan Marks reached across the empty side of his bed and silenced it before the second beep could sound. The apartment was cold. He kept the heat low to save money, and through the thin walls he could hear his neighbor's television already mumbling the early news. He sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. 49 years old, and this was what his life had become. A rented one-bedroom above Fletcher's hardware store in Port Salem, Maine. A place so temporary, he still hadn't bothered to hang pictures on the walls after 3 years. The only decoration was a framed photo of Marcus on the narrow bookshelf, his son at 12, grinning in his Little League uniform, back when things between them had been easier. The shipyard shift started at 6, which meant Evan had just enough time to shower, dress, and grab coffee from the gas station on Route 1. He worked as a welder, had been doing it for 26 years now. The pay was decent when he could get overtime, which lately was most weeks. He needed the money. Child support, rent, the truck payment, groceries, it all added up faster than his paycheck could cover it. By 5:30 he was in his pickup, a 2008 Ford with rust eating through the wheel wells and a heater that worked when it felt like it. The roads were empty this early, just him and the occasional lobster truck heading toward the docks. He knew this route by heart. Every pothole, every turn, every mile marker between his apartment and the shipyard. Work was work. Hot sparks, heavy metal, the constant noise of grinders and welders and men shouting over the din. Evan was good at it, good with his hands, patient, precise. His supervisor, Ron Castellano, had told him more than once that he could move up if he wanted to. Foreman, maybe shift manager eventually. But Evan never pursued it. Moving up meant more responsibility, more meetings, more time away from the one thing that mattered. Marcus. His son was 16 now, a junior at Port Salem High. He lived primarily with his mother, Laura, in the house Evan used to call home before the divorce. The custody arrangement was straightforward every other weekend, plus Wednesday dinners when Evan's schedule allowed. But lately, even those visits felt strained. Marcus had changed over the past year, grown quieter, more distant. He spent their time together staring at his phone, answering questions with single words, finding excuses to cut visits short. Evan didn't know how to reach him anymore. Every conversation felt like navigating a minefield. Talk about school, Marcus shrugged. Ask about friends, another shrug. Try to discuss the future, college, plans, silence or deflection. The kid who used to tell him everything, who used to light up when Evan came home from work, was gone, replaced by a stranger who barely made eye contact. The divorce had done that, 3 years ago, when everything fell apart. Evan and Laura had tried to make it work, counseling, date nights, promises to communicate better, but the truth was they'd grown into different people. She wanted stability, predictability, a partner who came home at 5:30 and didn't smell like metal shavings. He was tired all the time, working doubles to keep up with bills, too exhausted to be present even when he was home. They'd separated in the spring, divorced by fall. It was civil mostly. No screaming matches, no courtroom drama, just two people acknowledging they'd run out of road together. Marcus had been 13 then, old enough to understand but young enough to take it personally. He'd blamed Evan, which was fair. Evan blamed himself too. Now, their relationship consisted of awkward pickups, silent dinners, and the growing sense that Evan was losing his son one quiet moment at a time. Wednesday evening, Evan sat across from Marcus at the Riverside diner, watching him push French fries around his plate. The kid had barely touched his burger. His hair had gotten longer, hanging past his eyes, and he wore a black hoodie Evan didn't recognize. "How's school going?" Evan asked. "Fine. Your mom mentioned you might be struggling in math." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm handling it. I could help, you know. I was pretty good at algebra back in the day." "I said I'm handling it." The silence stretched between them. Evan sipped his coffee, searching for something else to say, something that wouldn't lead to another dead end. "You still playing baseball?" he tried. "Quit the team." "Oh. When?" "Month ago." Evan felt the familiar sting. "A month ago? And he was just hearing about it now. Why'd you quit?" Marcus shrugged. "Wasn't into it anymore." "But you loved baseball. You were good at it. Things change." Marcus finally looked up, and there was something hard in his eyes. "People change." After dropping Marcus back at Laura's house, a brief, uncomfortable handoff on the front porch, Evan drove home feeling hollowed out. He'd lost something vital, something he didn't know how to recover. The connection they'd once had seemed irretrievable now, buried under layers of silence and resentment and time. His family wasn't much help either. Evan had an older sister, Claire, who sold real estate in Portland and made a point of reminding everyone how successful she was, and a younger brother, David, who worked in tech consulting in Boston and visited Maine maybe twice a year. They'd grown up in competition with each other, pushed by parents who believed in tough love and high expectations. Their father had been a machinist, their mother a school administrator, both gone now, dad to a heart attack 10 years ago, mom to a stroke 3 years later. The only extended family Evan had left was his great-uncle Theodore. Captain Theodore Marks, technically, though Evan had never known him well. Theodore was his grandmother's brother, a man who'd served in the Navy during World War II and then disappeared into a solitary life on the Maine coast. Evan remembered seeing him at a few family gatherings when he was young, a tall, quiet man who smelled of salt and old books, who listened more than he spoke. The last time Evan had seen Theodore was at his mother's funeral. The old man had been in his 80s then, still sharp-eyed and upright, but distant. He'd offered his condolences, shaken Evan's hand, and left before the reception ended. After that, nothing. No calls, no letters, no contact. Until 2 weeks ago, when Evan received the phone call from a lawyer's office in Portland. Theodore Marks had passed away at 91. Natural causes, peacefully, in his sleep. And he'd left something to Evan in his will. The funeral had been small, held at a chapel overlooking the harbour. Maybe a dozen people attended, a few old veterans, some neighbours. The lawyer, Evan, had sat in the back row, feeling like an intruder at a stranger's service. The eulogy was brief, delivered by a chaplain who clearly hadn't known Theodore personally. It mentioned his military service, his years living alone on the coast, his reputation as a private but principled man. Afterward, the lawyer, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Hendricks, had approached Evan with a manila folder. "The formal reading is scheduled for next Tuesday," she'd said. "But I wanted you to know Captain Marks left specific instructions concerning you." "Me?" Evan had been surprised. "Why me?" "That will become clear at the reading. Can you attend? 10 o'clock, my office." Evan had agreed, more out of curiosity than expectation. He couldn't imagine what Theodore might have left him. They'd barely known each other. Now, sitting in his cold apartment on a Wednesday night, Evan stared at the business card Patricia Hendricks had given him. The reading was scheduled for Friday morning, 2 days away. He'd already requested the time off work, which Ron had grudgingly approved. What could a reclusive old veteran possibly leave to a great-nephew he'd barely spoken to? Evan didn't let himself hope for anything substantial. Maybe some books, perhaps a few old photographs, something small and symbolic. He thought about Marcus, about the growing distance between them, about the silence that filled their time together. He thought about his life, the double shifts, the empty apartment, the sense that he was treading water in the middle of an ocean with no shore in sight. Evan picked up his phone and typed a message to Marcus. "Thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay. Love you." He stared at the screen for 5 minutes before the reply came. K. Just the letter K. Evan set the phone down and closed his eyes. Sometimes the hardest part wasn't the fighting or the arguing. It was the slow, quiet way you could lose someone while they were still standing right in front of you. Friday morning arrived with rain. Evan drove to Portland through sheets of grey water, windshield wipers struggling to keep up. The law office was in a renovated brick building near the old port, 3rd floor, overlooking Commercial Street. He arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the waiting room, coffee from the lobby slowly growing cold in his hands. Claire showed up at 5 till 10, dressed in a tailored navy suit, heels clicking on the hardwood. She barely glanced at Evan before checking her phone. David arrived exactly at 10, carrying a leather messenger bag and looking mildly irritated at having to drive up from Boston. "This better not take long," David said to no one in particular. "I have a call at noon." Patricia Hendricks emerged from her office and gestured them inside. The room was modest but professional, bookshelves lined with legal volumes, a large oak desk, 3 chairs arranged in a semicircle. She took her seat and opened a folder. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I'll keep this brief. Captain Theodore Marks prepared his will 5 months ago, and his instructions were very specific." She adjusted her reading glasses. To Claire Marks, he bequeaths a savings bond in the amount of $5,000, purchased in 1985. Claire nodded, satisfied but not impressed. To David Marks, he leaves his collection of naval medals and commendations, as well as a brass navigational compass dated 1943. David's expression suggested he'd been hoping for more, but he said nothing. Patricia paused, then looked directly at Evan. To Evan Marks, he bequeaths the submarine Persephone and all contents therein. The silence in the room was absolute. Claire laughed first, a short, disbelieving bark. "That's correct," Patricia said, maintaining her professional composure. "A submarine," David repeated slowly. "Like an actual submarine. A decommissioned research vessel, yes. SP-47, commonly called Persephone. It's currently located on Captain Marks's property at Cutter's Point, approximately 45 miles north of here." Evan sat frozen, trying to process what he'd just heard. "I don't understand. Why would he leave me a submarine?" "Captain Marks didn't provide detailed reasoning in his will," Patricia explained, "but he did leave explicit instructions. You have 30 days to take formal possession of the vessel. If you decline or fail to claim it within that time frame, ownership reverts to the state of Maine." Claire was still laughing, shaking her head. "This is ridiculous. What's Evan supposed to do with a rusted submarine? Open a tourist attraction?" "It's probably worth scrap metal," David said, his tone dismissive. "If that, you'll spend more money having it removed than you'll ever get back." Patricia slid a manila envelope across the desk to Evan. "Captain Marks also left you this. He specified it should be opened only after you've entered the vessel." Evan took the envelope. His name was written across the front in careful, old-fashioned handwriting. Inside, he could feel something small and metallic shifting. "There are some legal documents to sign," Patricia continued, pulling out forms. "Transfer of ownership, liability waivers, property agreements. The submarine is situated on land that's also part of the estate, which will be sold separately. But you have access rights to the vessel itself for the next year." Claire stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Well, This has been entertaining. Evan, when you figure out what to do with your pile of rust, let us know. Maybe we can get a family discount on the scrap." David gathered his things more quietly, but his expression said the same thing, pity mixed with second-hand embarrassment. After his siblings left, Evan remained seated while Patricia walked him through the paperwork. His hands moved mechanically, signing where she indicated, initialing pages he barely read. His mind was elsewhere, trying to make sense of this bizarre inheritance. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Of course. Did you know my uncle well?" Patricia considered the question. "I handled some legal matters for him over the years, property taxes, estate planning. He was a very private man, but always courteous, always precise." She paused. "He came to my office last spring to update his will. That's when he made these specific arrangements. I asked him why he wanted to leave you the submarine, if he'd like me to include an explanation in the will. What did he say? He said, Evan was always the one who looked deeper. Then he smiled. I'd never seen him smile before and said, he'll understand when he needs to. Evan felt something catch in his throat. He didn't remember ever having a meaningful conversation with Theodore, let alone one that would inspire such faith. Patricia handed him a key ring, 3 brass keys on a loop, heavy and corroded with age. A small compass rose was engraved on the metal ring itself. "These are for the submarine," she said. "Hull access, captain's quarters, and a storage locker. The property at Cutter's Point is gated, but here's the code." She wrote it on a business card. "I'd recommend visiting sooner rather than later. The structure has been sitting unused for years." Evan drove home in a daze, the envelope and keys sitting on the passenger seat. Rain continued to fall, turning the highway into a river of brake lights and grey mist. His phone buzzed twice, Claire texting the family group chat with laughing emojis and comments about Evan's new yacht. He didn't respond. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer against the window. The envelope sat on his nightstand, still sealed. The keys caught streetlight from outside, gleaming dully. At 2 a.m, he gave up trying to rest. He made coffee and sat at his small kitchen table, turning the keys over in his hands. Why a submarine? Why him? Theodore had been a stranger, essentially. A presence at the edges of family gatherings, a name mentioned occasionally but never explained. Evan thought back to the one conversation he could clearly remember. Christmas, maybe 20 years ago. He'd been in his late 20s, recently married, Marcus just a toddler. The family had gathered at his parents' house, too many people in too small a space, everyone talking over each other. Theodore had been sitting alone in the corner of the living room, watching the chaos with quiet eyes. Evan had brought him a cup of coffee, more out of politeness than genuine interest. "Thank you," Theodore had said. His voice was deep, measured. "You're kind to think of an old man. It's no trouble." They'd sat in silence for a moment, then Theodore had asked, "Do you ever wonder what's beneath the surface, Evan?" The question had seemed odd at the time. "I'm not sure what you mean." Theodore had looked at him with those sharp blue eyes. "Most people see what's in front of them and think that's all there is, but the important things, they're usually hidden, waiting for someone patient enough to look." Young Evan hadn't known how to respond. The conversation had ended when Marcus started crying, pulling Evan's attention away. By the time he'd settled his son, Theodore had gone. Now, sitting alone in his apartment 2 decades later, Evan wondered if that brief exchange had meant more than he'd realized. At 3 a.m, he made a decision. He'd go see the submarine. Tomorrow, no. Today, since it was already Friday. He'd call in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. He'd drive to Cutter's Point and see what Theodore had left him. Not because he expected anything valuable, not because he believed there was some grand mystery waiting to be solved, but because a lonely old man had trusted him with something, and Evan couldn't ignore that, whatever Theodore's reasons. They mattered enough to warrant at least one visit. He picked up the sealed envelope and held it to the light. He couldn't see through the paper, couldn't tell what was inside beyond the keys. Evan set it back down. He'd open it when he got there, as Theodore had instructed. Some things, he was beginning to understand, required patience, required looking beneath the surface to see what really mattered. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, Evan sat with his cold coffee and waited for dawn. The drive to Cutter's Point took longer than Evan expected. The coastal road twisted through small fishing villages and stretches of pine forest, each mile taking him further from anything familiar. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the morning clear and cold. October sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the pavement. He followed the GPS to a gravel turnoff marked by a weathered wooden sign, "Private Property." The gate was there, just as Patricia had described, chain link and rust, secured with a combination lock. Evan punched in the code. The lock clicked open. The road beyond was barely more than 2 rutted tracks through tall grass. His truck bounced over rocks and dips, branches scraping against the doors. Then the trees opened up, and he saw the ocean, grey, blue and endless, stretching to the horizon. And there, sitting on a rocky beach like something from a fever dream, was the submarine. Evan stopped the truck and sat staring through the windshield. The vessel was bigger than he'd imagined. Maybe 60 feet long, the hull painted in layers of peeling grey and rust orange. Barnacles clung to the lower sections, and seaweed had dried in brown tangles around the base. The conning tower rose from the centre, portholes dark and empty as dead eyes. It looked abandoned, forgotten, like something that had washed up from another time and been left to rot. But it was also strangely beautiful, the way it sat against the landscape, defiant and solid despite decades of neglect. Someone had built this. Someone had commanded it, lived in it, trusted their life to it. Evan climbed out of the truck. The wind off the ocean was sharp and salt-thick. Seabirds called from somewhere overhead. He walked slowly toward the submarine, his boots crunching on the rocky beach. Up close, the scale was even more impressive. The hull door was visible on the landward side, sealed tight. The painted designation was still legible despite the weathering, SP-47. Beneath it, in smaller letters, Persephone. He pulled out the key ring. The first key slid into the hull door lock. It resisted at first, corroded by time and salt air, but then it turned with a heavy click. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, revealing darkness beyond. Evan pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The air was different here, musty, thick, untouched for what might be years. His light beam cut through the gloom, revealing a narrow corridor. The walls were metal, riveted and close. Everything was intact, preserved in the dry climate of the sealed vessel. He moved forward carefully, letting his eyes adjust. The corridor opened into a larger space, the main cabin. Furniture was bolted to the floor, a small table, bench seats, storage compartments. Everything covered in dust, but remarkably well preserved. Evan remembered the sealed envelope. He pulled it from his jacket pocket and carefully tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded twice. Theodore's handwriting covered one side. "Evan," it read, "you were always the one who looked deeper. This boat holds what I couldn't say in life. Start with the captain's quarters. The answers are in the details. Trust what you find. Uncle Theodore." Evan read it twice, his confusion deepening. What answers? What couldn't Theodore say? He continued through the submarine. The galley was next, a compact kitchen with a 2-burner stove, sink, and storage cabinets. Then crew quarters, narrow bunks stacked against the walls. An observation deck with instrument panels frozen in time, dials and gauges covered in decades of dust. Finally, he found the captain's quarters. A small door at the end of the corridor, marked with a tarnished brass plate. He used the second key to unlock it. The room was tiny but personal. A narrow bed built into one wall, a desk bolted to the floor, shelves lined with books. This was where Theodore had spent time. Evan could feel it. This space held more than function. It held life. He approached the desk carefully. 3 drawers, all closed. He tried the bottom one first. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather-bound book. Evan lifted it gently, unwrapped it. The cover was embossed with a single word, log. He opened it to the first page. Theodore's handwriting, young and precise. Navigation log, SP-47 Persephone, Captain Theodore Marks, January 1943. Evan's hands trembled as he turned the pages. These weren't standard naval records. They were personal entries, observations, reflections. Theodore's voice from across decades. The 12th of April, 1944. Today, we mapped the shoals off Halifax. Lieutenant James thinks it's pointless work, that we should be hunting enemy vessels instead. But I see poetry in knowing what lies beneath the surface. Every hidden reef, every underwater valley, they tell stories if you're willing to listen. Evan sat down on the edge of the bed and kept reading. Entry after entry revealed a man fascinated not just with navigation, but with preservation, with understanding. The 3rd of June, 1944, found a wreck today, civilian merchant vessel sunk in the last war. The crew has been searching for military targets, but I spent an hour documenting the coordinates, the condition, the story of what went down. Someone's great-grandfather might have sailed that ship. Someone might want to know where it rests. The entries continued through 1944 and into 1945. Theodore wrote about his crew, about the weight of command, about the things he saw that no one else seemed to notice or care about. Then Evan found something that made him stop. The 15th of October 1945. The war is over, but some work remains. Command doesn't know about this mission, they wouldn't understand. Some things are more important than following orders. Some things need to be protected, even if it means acting alone. The entry ended there. No explanation, no details about what work Theodore meant. Evan flipped forward. More entries, but vaguer. References to the collection and what I'm preserving, coordinates listed without context, names mentioned but never explained. The 2nd of November 1945, 3 locations secured. The trust must be honored even if no one else knows about it. 3 locations. Evan went back through the log, finding the coordinates Theodore had noted. He pulled out his phone and started typing them into a maps application, but there was no signal this far out. He'd have to research them later. Losing track of time, Evan read through the entire log. By the time he finished, his phone showed it was past noon. He'd been in the submarine for hours. His stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten since yesterday. But he couldn't leave yet. There was more here, he could feel it. Theodore had left him this for a reason, and Evan was beginning to understand that the submarine itself was just the beginning. He checked his phone. 3 missed calls from work, a text from Ron. "Where are you? Call me." Guilt flickered through him, but he pushed it aside. This mattered. For the first time in years, something felt important in a way that transcended daily obligations. Evan stood, taking one more look around the captain's quarters. Theodore had sat at this desk, written these entries, lived in this small space while carrying secrets Evan was only beginning to glimpse. "I'm listening now," Evan said aloud to the empty room. "I'm finally listening." He locked the captain's quarters and made his way back through the submarine to the hull door. The afternoon light seemed too bright after hours in the dimness. He secured the door behind him and stood for a moment on the rocky beach, breathing salt air and trying to process everything. Theodore hadn't left him junk, he'd left him a mystery, a purpose, something that required patience and attention and the willingness to look beneath the surface. Evan climbed back into his truck. He'd come back tomorrow with better lighting, a notebook, maybe a camera. He'd document everything Theodore had left behind. But first, he needed to text Marcus. Not about the submarine yet, that could wait. Just something simple. He typed, "Found something interesting today. Made me think of you. Hope you're having a good day." He sent it before he could second-guess himself. The reply came as he started the engine. K. One letter. But it was something. And right now, Evan would take whatever connection he could get. Evan returned to the submarine 3 times over the next week. Each visit revealed something new, peeling back layers of Theodore's solitary life, like opening a book 1 page at a time. He brought supplies on the second trip, LED lanterns, cleaning cloths, a thermos of coffee, and a notebook to document what he found. The submarine's interior came alive under better lighting. Details emerged that he'd missed in the dimness. Photographs tucked into crevices, margin notes in the books on Theodore's shelves, small personal touches that humanized the cold metal space. Work had noticed his absences. Ron called him into the office on Tuesday morning, arms crossed, expression serious. "You're using up a lot of goodwill here, Marks," Ron said. 3 days in 2 weeks. What's going on? "Family situation," Evan said. It wasn't entirely a lie. "Is Marcus okay?" "He's fine. It's complicated." Ron studied him for a long moment. "You've been here 26 years, never missed a day until recently. So I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, but this needs to stop. We've got deadlines. And I can't have my best welder disappearing." "I understand. I'll make it right." "You better, because next time we're talking about more than a conversation." Evan promised to focus, to be reliable again. But even as he said it, his mind was already planning his next visit to Cutter's Point. On his 3rd trip, he found the letters. They were in a sealed storage locker beneath the captain's bed, a space he'd missed on previous visits because the bed frame concealed the access panel. He discovered it by accident, bumping against the metal support and hearing a hollow echo that shouldn't have been there. Inside the locker were waterproof containers, olive green and military issue. Evan opened the first one carefully. Inside were bundles of letters, tied with twine, organized by date. The earliest were from 1944, the latest from the 1992nd. He sat on the floor of the captain's quarters and began reading. The letters were addressed to Theodore from members of his submarine crew. Most were written in the years immediately following the war, when young men returned home and tried to make sense of civilian life. They wrote to their captain like he was a father figure, a counselor, someone who understood what they'd been through. "Dear Captain Marks, read one from 1946. I wanted to write and thank you. You saved my life during the war, not just from enemy fire, but from myself. When I was ready to give up, when the fear was too much, you sat with me in the galley at 2 in the morning and told me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it. I think about that every day. I'm home now, married, working at my father's store. But I wanted you to know that your words still guide me." Letter after letter carried similar sentiments: gratitude, respect, love. Theodore had clearly been more than a commanding officer. He'd been a mentor, a steady presence in chaos. One letter from 1952 stood out. "Captain, the annual reunion is next month in Boston. The whole crew will be there. Everyone's asking about you. Please come. It's not the same without you leading us." Theodore's response was paperclipped to the back. "I appreciate the invitation, but I must decline. My work here requires my full attention. Give my regards to the men. Tell them I think of them often." What work? What required such isolation? Evan continued reading, moving chronologically through the decades. The letters came less frequently as the years passed. Men died, moved on, lost touch. But some kept writing, even into Theodore's old age. A letter from 1968. From someone named James Hartley. Captain Marks, the crew still gathers every year on the anniversary. We're older now, greyer, slower, but we toast you every time. You taught us that survival isn't just about making it home, it's about remembering why we wanted to. You gave us purpose beyond duty. Evan's throat tightened reading these words. He'd known Theodore as a distant, silent figure, but these men had known him as a leader, a confidant, someone who shaped their lives in profound ways. Why had Theodore isolated himself? Why refuse connection with people who clearly loved him? Then Evan found a letter that changed everything. It was water-damaged, the ink smeared in places, dated September 1945. The handwriting was shaky, urgent. He could only make out fragments. Captain, the coordinates you gave me never told anyone, still there, waiting. The promise we made, what we protected. Trust no one else. You were right about the risks. The signature was illegible, lost to water damage. Evan read it 3 times, trying to fill in the gaps. Someone had coordinates. Something was being protected. Promises were made. He pulled out Theodore's navigation log and compared dates. September 1945, right after the war ended. Theodore had written about work that remains in October of that year. Evan cross-referenced the coordinates mentioned in the log with the fragments in the letter. 3 locations kept appearing, coastal sites within 200 miles of where he sat right now, 2 in Maine, 1 in Nova Scotia. He plotted them on his phone, creating a digital map. The 3 points formed a rough triangle along the Atlantic coast. Each location was marked in Theodore's log with cryptic notes. Site Alpha Lighthouse Preservation Essential. Site Beta Island secured, October 12. Site Gamma, Northern Shelter, final piece. What was Theodore preserving? What was so important that he'd spend the rest of his life guarding it in secret? Evan lost track of time again. When he finally checked his phone, it was nearly 7 in the evening. He had 4 missed calls from Laura and 2 texts from Marcus. Laura's message was terse. Marcus got into a fight at school, suspended for 3 days. You need to deal with this. Marcus's texts were defensive. It wasn't my fault, and Mom's overreacting. Evan's heart sank. His son was in trouble, and he'd been so absorbed in Theodore's mystery that he'd missed it entirely. He called Laura. She answered on the first ring. "Where have you been?" Her voice was sharp. "I've been calling for hours. I'm sorry." Marcus punched another kid in the cafeteria, gave him a bloody nose. The school suspended him for the rest of the week. That's not like him. What started it? I don't know. He won't talk to me about it. Maybe he'll talk to you. Evan doubted it, but he had to try. Can I take him for the suspension? Keep him with me? Laura was silent for a moment. I was going to say no. But honestly, maybe time with you will help. He's been so angry lately. Maybe you can get through to him. I'll try. Evan, he needs his father right now. Not someone distracted by work or whatever else. He needs you present. I know. I will be. After hanging up, Evan sat in the submarine's captain quarters, surrounded by Theodore's letters and logs. His great-uncle had chosen isolation, had prioritized a secret mission over human connection. Evan could see where that path led: a lonely death, a sparse funeral, a life spent protecting something at the cost of everything else. He wouldn't make that choice. Whatever Theodore had been guarding, whatever mystery waited at those coordinates, it couldn't be more important than Marcus. But maybe, just maybe, this mystery could be a bridge instead of a barrier, something to share with his son, a way to connect through discovery rather than sitting in uncomfortable silence. Evan gathered the letters carefully, returning them to their waterproof containers. He locked up the submarine and stood on the beach as the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow he'd pick up Marcus, and he'd try something different. He'd show his son this place, this mystery. He'd invite Marcus into something that mattered. It was a risk. Marcus might dismiss it, might refuse to engage, but it was worth trying. Because sitting across a table in silence, watching his son slip further away, that was unbearable. This submarine, these secrets, Theodore's trust, maybe they were a gift after all, not what Evan expected, but what he needed. A reason to look deeper. A reason to reach out. A reason to hope. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, with his arms crossed, staring out the window at the passing trees. He'd been silent since Evan picked him up 20 minutes ago, responding to questions with shrugs or single syllables. "Your mum said you don't want to talk about the fight," Evan said carefully. "There's nothing to talk about. Marcus, you punched someone. That's not nothing." The kid's jaw tightened. He had it coming. What did he say? Silence. Evan tried a different approach. "I'm not going to lecture you. I just want to understand what happened." Marcus finally looked at him, something defensive and hurt in his eyes. "He said you were pathetic, that you work a dead-end job and can't even afford a real apartment." He laughed about it in front of everyone. The words hit Evan harder than he expected. Not because they were wrong, they were mostly true, but because Marcus had felt the need to defend him with violence. "So, you hit him?" "Yeah, I hit him." "Marcus, what was I supposed to do? Let him talk about you like that? Let everyone laugh?" Evan's throat felt tight. "You don't have to fight my battles. Someone has to." Marcus turned back to the window. "You just take it. All the overtime, the cheap apartment, everyone treating you like you don't matter. Someone should stand up for you." They drove in silence for a while. Evan didn't know what to say. His son had gotten suspended defending his honor, and instead of feeling angry, Evan felt something close to heartbreak. "I'm taking you somewhere," Evan said finally. "Something I found. Something I want to share with you." "Where?" "You'll see." The road to Cutter's Point was less jarring the fourth time. Evan navigated the ruts and rocks with more confidence, pulling up to the clearing where the submarine sat against the ocean backdrop. Marcus straightened in his seat, his defensive posture shifting to confusion. "What is that?" "Your great-great-uncle's submarine. The one he left me." "That's the inheritance everyone was laughing about?" "Yeah." Marcus got out of the truck slowly, walking toward the vessel like it might be a mirage. Up close, his expression changed from skepticism to something approaching wonder. "This is actually kind of cool." Evan smiled. "Wait until you see inside." They entered together, and Evan watched Marcus's face as the teenager took in the narrow corridors, the preserved equipment, the layers of history built into every surface. He led him to the captain's quarters, showed him the navigation log, the letters. Marcus read one of the letters aloud, his voice softening as he worked through the grateful words of a long-dead sailor. "These guys really loved him, huh?" "Yeah. I'm trying to understand why he kept all this secret. Maybe he was protecting something." Marcus set the letter down carefully, like a mission that never ended. Evan pulled out his phone, showed Marcus the coordinates he'd mapped. He marked 3 locations. "I think there's something at each one, something he was guarding." Marcus leaned in, interested now in a way Evan hadn't seen in months. "Like what?" "Treasure? I don't know. But he spent 50 years alone out here. It must have been important." They spent the next hour going through Theodore's materials together. Marcus proved surprisingly good at spotting patterns, connecting details Evan had missed. The kid pulled up his laptop, he'd brought it without thinking, and started researching historical context. "Look at this," Marcus said, angling the screen. 1945. After the war ended, there were tons of stolen goods floating around. Art, gold, documents. Allies were scrambling to recover everything the Nazis took. You think Theodore was involved in that? Maybe. These dates match up. And look, Marcus pointed to a notation in the log. He mentions preservation a lot. Like he was trying to save something. They theorized together, building scenarios, testing ideas against the evidence. Evan watched his son come alive with curiosity, the sullen teenager replaced by an engaged young man working through a puzzle. At some point, Marcus opened up, not about the fight directly, but about everything around it. "I feel like I don't fit anywhere," he said quietly, still looking at the laptop screen. "School's pointless. Mum's always on me about grades and college. My friends are into stuff I don't care about." He paused. "And I miss you. But when we're together, I don't know what to say anymore." Evan sat down on the captain's bed, the metal frame creaking. "I miss you too. Every day. I know you work hard. I know the overtime is because you're trying to provide. That kid at school, he doesn't get it. He doesn't know what it's like when your parents split up and everything changes." "Is that why you hit him?" Marcus nodded. "I was already angry about everything, and he gave me a target. That's not a good strategy for dealing with anger." "I know." Marcus finally looked up, but it felt better than doing nothing. They talked for another hour, not about the mystery or the submarine, but about life, about the divorce, about Marcus's fears for the future, about Evan's own struggles to be present while working himself into the ground. "This place is different," Marcus said eventually. "Being here with you, working on something together, it feels right, like we're actually doing something instead of just pretending everything's okay. You want to help me figure out what Theodore was protecting?" "Yeah, I really do. It might mean some driving around. Visiting these coordinates could take time. Arriving." Marcus grinned a real, genuine smile that Evan hadn't seen in months. "I'm suspended for 3 days. I've got nothing but time." They made a plan. Tomorrow they'd research the locations more thoroughly, gather equipment they might need. Then this weekend, they'd visit the first coordinate, a lighthouse at Pemaquid Point. As they locked up the submarine and walked back to the truck, Marcus said, "Thanks for bringing me here. Thanks for coming. Can I ask you something? Why do you think he left this to you, out of everyone in the family?" Evan thought about Theodore's note. "You were always the one who looked deeper." "I think he saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself," Evan said. "He thought I'd care about this, about preserving something important instead of just profiting from it." He was right. The drive back to Evan's apartment felt different. Marcus asked questions about Evan's work, about his childhood, about things they'd never discussed before. Not interrogation, just genuine curiosity. The kind of conversation they used to have when Marcus was younger. At the apartment, they ordered Chinese food and kept researching. Marcus pulled up information about the monuments, men Allied officers tasked with protecting cultural heritage during World War II. He found lists of stolen artwork still missing, families still searching for lost treasures. "What if that's it?" Marcus said, excited. "What if Theodore was hiding art, protecting it from people who wanted to profit from the war?" That would explain the secrecy, the isolation, and the coordinates they could be, hiding spots, places he stashed, recovered pieces. It was speculation, but it felt right. Evan could see it, Theodore, principled and solitary, taking on a mission no one else knew about, spending his life guarding treasures that belonged to families destroyed by war. Marcus fell asleep on the couch around midnight, laptop still open beside him. Evan covered him with a blanket and stood watching his son sleep. The angry, distant teenager was still there, but underneath was the kid Evan remembered. The one who got excited about mysteries and asked endless questions and saw the world as something worth exploring. Maybe they'd both been lost. Maybe this submarine, this strange inheritance, was Theodore's way of helping them find each other again. Evan made one more note in his notebook before turning off the lights. 3 locations, 3 chances to finish what Theodore started, 3 opportunities to build something real with my son. Outside, the main night was clear and cold. Inside, for the first time in years, Evan felt something that had been missing for too long: hope. The next morning brought a shift in their dynamic. Marcus woke up early, already showered and dressed by the time Evan stumbled out of his bedroom. The kid had coffee brewing and was hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and handwritten notes. "I've been mapping the coordinates," Marcus said without looking up. "The lighthouse location is definitely Pemaquid Point. It's still operational, gets a lot of tourists. But look," he turned the laptop screen toward Evan. "There's a rocky outcrop below the lighthouse, accessible only at low tide. Theodore's notes mentioned beneath the light, which could mean literally underneath." Evan poured himself coffee and sat down. His son had annotated a digital map with tide schedules, access routes, and historical notes about the lighthouse. The level of detail was impressive. "You've been busy. Couldn't sleep. This is too interesting." Marcus pulled up another window. "And check this out. I found information about Theodore's submarine service. SP-47 was involved in coastal survey work, mapping underwater topography. But there's a gap in the official records. October through November, 1945, the sub was supposedly in port for repairs. But Theodore's log has entries during that time. So he went off book." "Exactly. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't sanctioned." Marcus's eyes were bright with excitement. "The second location, the island near Bar Harbor, it was privately owned in the 1942 by a guy named Edmund Cartwright. He died in 1982, and the property's been abandoned since. Nobody goes there. Good place to hide something. The third spot in Nova Scotia is harder. It's a coastal area that's now a nature preserve. Public land, but remote. We'd need to do some hiking to reach the coordinates." They spent the morning planning. Evan called Laura to explain they'd be doing some traveling over the next few days, following up on Theodore's estate, he said, which was technically true. She was skeptical but agreed, probably just relieved that Marcus seemed engaged with something productive. By noon, they were on the road to Pemaquid Point, 2 hours south. Marcus rode shotgun with a physical map spread across his lap, tracking their progress and reading aloud from articles he'd found about World War II art recovery. "There's this whole unit called the Monuments Men," Marcus explained. "Allied officers who track down stolen art and cultural artifacts. The Nazis looted everything, paintings, sculptures, religious items. Millions of pieces went missing. And some never got returned. Right. Either lost in the chaos or taken by people who saw an opportunity to profit. There are families still searching for heirlooms their grandparents owned." Marcus was quiet for a moment. If Theodore was protecting recovered pieces, waiting for the right time to return them, that would make sense. It would explain everything. They arrived at Pemaquid Point just after 2. The lighthouse stood white and proud against the blue October sky. Tourists scattered across the grounds taking photos. Evan and Marcus paid the entrance fee and walked the property, trying to look casual while studying the terrain. The rocky outcrop was exactly where Marcus's research said it would be, a formation of dark stone below the lighthouse, currently underwater. According to the tide schedule, they'd have about a 2-hour window starting at 5:30 when the rocks would be accessible. "We wait," Evan said. They killed time at a seafood shack down the road, sharing a basket of fried clams and watching the ocean. Marcus talked more openly than he had in months about school, about feeling pressure to have his life figured out, about not knowing what he wanted. "Everyone expects you to know at 16, Marcus said. "College, career, the whole path mapped out, but I don't know. Nothing feels right." "I was the same way at your age," Evan admitted. "I thought I wanted to be an architect. Draw buildings, create things that lasted. But life took me different directions." "Do you regret it? The shipyard, I mean." Evan considered the question. "Sometimes, but regret doesn't change anything. You do the best you can with what you have." "That's kind of sad, Dad." "Maybe. Or maybe it's just honest." Marcus looked at him thoughtfully. What we're doing now, this feels important, like it matters beyond just us." "It does. If we're right about what Theodore was protecting, this could mean something to a lot of people. Then let's make sure we do it right." At 5:30, With the tide receding, they made their way down the steep path to the outcrop. The rocks were slippery with seaweed, and the evening air carried the sharp bite of coming winter. They moved carefully, using Theodore's coordinates to pinpoint the exact location. Marcus spotted it first. A natural cave, partially hidden by larger boulders. The opening was narrow, but they could squeeze through. Evan went first, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the interior. The cave was deeper than it looked from outside, extending back into the rock formation. The floor was dry despite the proximity to water, sloping upward enough to stay above the high tide line, and there, wedged into a crevice at the back, was a metal box. It took both of them to pull it free. The box was heavy, sealed with a combination lock, but engraved on the bottom, barely visible beneath corrosion, were numbers 471933. The submarine number and the year, Marcus said. 1947, 1933. No, wait. 4 to 7 for SP-47 and 1945 for the year the war ended. Evan tried the combination, 471945. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in protective oilcloth, were documents, official papers, typed and stamped with military seals. The header read, Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives Program, Confidential. Evan's hands shook as he carefully unfolded the papers. A list of items, each with detailed descriptions. Raphael, Madonna of the Shadows, 1518. Oil on canvas. Recovered from Berlin storage, March 1945. Original owner, Rosenberg family, Vienna. Vermeer, girl reading by window. Stolen from Amsterdam, 1943. Rightful owner, Vanderberg collection. More entries followed. Paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, each marked with Theodore's initials and coordinates. Marcus read over his shoulder, his voice barely a whisper. This is real. This is actually real. At the bottom of the document was Theodore's handwritten note. Official channels cannot be trusted. These treasures belong to their people, not to victors or profiteers. I will guard them until they can be safely returned. Additional pages detailed Theodore's attempts to work with authorities in the 1950 seconds, accusations of theft, threats of prosecution, names of officials who wanted the items for private collections. His final note, dated 1998, was heartbreaking. I am old now, and no solution has come. I leave this burden to the one who looks deeper. Let them finish what I could not. Evan sat back on his heels, the weight of understanding crushing down on him. Theodore had spent 50 years alone, guarding stolen art, waiting for someone trustworthy. He'd sacrificed connection, family, any kind of normal life, all to protect cultural heritage that belonged to families destroyed by war. Dad, Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. What do we do? We verify the other locations, make sure everything's still safe. Then we find the right people to help us return these pieces to their rightful homes. But Theodore tried that. They threatened him. Things are different now. There are organizations dedicated to this work, people who've spent their lives on restitution. Evan looked at his son. We have to try. We have to finish what he started. Marcus nodded slowly. This is bigger than us. Yeah, it is. They carefully photographed every document, then resealed the box and returned it to the crevice. The tide was coming in, and they had to move quickly back to solid ground. By the time they reached the truck, both were soaked and shivering, but neither cared. On the drive home, Marcus was quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Evan had never heard before. He gave up everything for this, his whole life. He believed it was worth it. Was it, being that alone? Evan thought about Theodore's solitary funeral, the sparse attendance, the decades of isolation. I don't know, but I think he did what he thought was right. And now we get to make a different choice. We can honor his work without sacrificing everything else. How? By doing this together, by letting it bring us closer instead of pushing us apart. Marcus reached over and squeezed Evan's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. They had 2 more locations to check, 2 more pieces of Theodore's puzzle, and a mission that would change both their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, driving through the Maine twilight, with his son beside him, Evan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but purpose. The sense that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what mattered. Theodore had trusted him with this. And Evan wouldn't let him down. The Bar Harbor trip required more preparation. The island was 3 miles offshore, accessible only by boat, and Evan's limited boating experience made him nervous. But Marcus's enthusiasm pushed them forward. The kid researched rental options, studied weather patterns, and even watched YouTube videos on basic boat operation. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and calm seas. They rented a small motorboat from a marina, the owner giving them a skeptical look when Evan admitted he hadn't been on the water in 15 years. "Stay close to shore," the man advised. "Weather can change fast this time of year." The journey out was rougher than Evan expected. The boat pitched and rolled over the swells, spray soaking them both. Marcus gripped the side with white knuckles, but didn't complain. When the island finally came into view, a small, rocky outcrop covered in scrub vegetation, they both exhaled in relief. They pulled the boat onto a narrow beach and secured it. The island was eerily quiet, just wind and waves and the occasional cry of seabirds. No signs of human presence, no structures visible through the dense brush. Using Theodore's coordinates, they pushed inland. The terrain was difficult, thorny bushes catching their clothes, loose rocks shifting under their boots. An hour of searching brought them to a weathered stone marker, partially hidden by vegetation. Marcus knelt beside it, brushing away dirt and moss. "There are initials carved here. E.M. Evan Marks?" Evan asked. "Or Edith Marks? That was Theodore's mother's name, right?" Evan nodded, remembering the family tree. He used family initials as markers. The stone pointed toward a rocky outcrop. They followed the direction, circling the formation, until Marcus spotted it, a hidden entrance, expertly concealed behind decades of growth. They cleared the vegetation to reveal a steel door set into stone, locked with a combination mechanism. The lighthouse combination didn't work. Evan tried several variations of dates and numbers from Theodore's life. Nothing. "The submarine number," Marcus suggested, "but different. Try the full designation, SP47. Still nothing. "Wait." Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos of Theodore's documents. "Here." In one of his letters, he mentions the 12th of October 1945, the date he secured. Site Beta. Try the 12th of October 2045. The lock disengaged with a satisfying click. The door opened on protesting hinges. Stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of dry stone and time. They stepped inside, flashlights cutting through absolute darkness. The chamber was artificial, built or modified with clear purpose. The walls were smooth stone, the floor level and dry. Climate control equipment sat in one corner, old but still functional, and in the center of the room stood a large titanium container, sealed and marked with conservation symbols. They approached it carefully, reverently. The container required both of them to lift the heavy lid. Inside were climate-controlled compartments, each holding something wrapped in archival materials. Evan unwrapped the first item with trembling hands. The protective layers fell away to reveal a painting, colors so vivid they seemed to glow in the flashlight beam. A Madonna and Child, rendered in a style that spoke of centuries past, of master craftsmanship, of impossible beauty. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed. "Dad, this is real." Evan checked Theodore's documentation, hands shaking. Madonna of the Shadows, Raphael, 1518. Listed as destroyed in Berlin, 1945. But it wasn't destroyed. It was here, perfect, preserved by a man who'd spent his life protecting it. More compartments revealed more treasures. A smaller painting, a domestic scene in the Dutch style, a bronze sculpture of a dancing figure, each piece accompanied by meticulous documentation. They sat on the chamber floor, surrounded by artwork worth millions, by pieces of history thought lost forever. The magnitude of what Theodore had done settled over them like a physical weight. Then Evan found the second container smaller, tucked behind the first. Inside were files. Detailed provenance records in Theodore's careful handwriting. For each artwork, he documented original ownership, theft circumstances, recovery details, and most importantly, rightful heirs. For the Raphael, original owner, Rosenberg family, Vienna, father, mother, 3 children, all perished at Auschwitz. Surviving daughter, Sarah Rosenberg, emigrated to New York, 1947. Last known address, Brooklyn. Theodore's notes continued. Attempted contact 1956, no response. Attempted again, 1963, letter returned. Tried through Jewish Family Services, 1971, family relocated, no forwarding. Keep searching. More entries documented his decades-long effort to find rightful owners. Some families had been completely destroyed by the war. Others had scattered, lost to time and distance. Theodore had tried to return these pieces properly, but the complexity, the bureaucracy, the corrupt officials, it had all defeated him. His final note was dated just months before his death. "I am dying." The doctor confirmed advanced cancer. "These pieces deserve better than to remain hidden. But I cannot trust authorities who have already tried to seize them for profit. I need someone with integrity, someone who will see this through properly." Marcus was crying, reading through the files. He knew their names. Every family, every person who lost something, he cared about all of them. Evan understood now. This wasn't about art or value or treasure. This was about stolen lives, destroyed families, cultural heritage ripped away by genocide. Theodore had tried to restore what could never truly be restored, but he'd refused to give up, and he'd left it all to Evan. The responsibility was crushing. These pieces belonged in museums, in the hands of surviving families, in the cultural institutions they'd been stolen from. But how? Who could they trust? "We can't do this alone," Evan said quietly. "This is too big, too important." But Theodore tried working with authorities. They threatened to prosecute him. That was 60 years ago. Things have changed. There are organizations now, people dedicated to exactly this kind of work. Marcus pulled up his phone, searching. "There's a Holocaust restitution project. Director is Dr. Sarah Chen. She's got a reputation for actually getting pieces back to families. Testimonials from all over the world." Evan read over his shoulder. Dr. Chen's credentials were impeccable. PhD in art history, 20 years working on restitution, dozens of successful returns. Her organization was non-profit, transparent, focused entirely on reuniting stolen art with rightful owners. "We document everything," Evan decided. "Photograph it all, but don't move anything yet. Then we contact her, explain the situation, get expert help." They spent the next 3 hours carefully photographing every piece, every document, every detail of the chamber. Marcus created a digital archive, while Evan took detailed notes. When they finally resealed the chamber and made their way back to the boat, both were exhausted but energized. They'd found something that mattered, something bigger than themselves. The return journey was quieter. The ocean had grown choppier, and Evan had to focus on keeping the boat steady. But Marcus kept looking back at the island, at the place where Theodore had hidden treasures worth more than money could measure. "What if someone else finds it before we can protect it?" Marcus asked. "We move fast. We do this right. We trust the right people." Back at the marina, as they returned the boat, Marcus drafted an email to Dr. Chen on his phone. Careful wording, professional but urgent. Discovered documentation related to World War II art recovery. Need to discuss confidentially. Matter of historical and cultural significance. They sent it from the truck, both holding their breath. The response came 20 minutes later, while they were still driving home. "Available to speak tomorrow. This is my life's work. If your information is legitimate, we'll handle it with utmost care and integrity." Evan and Marcus looked at each other. This was the point of no return. Once they involved Dr. Chen, once they brought authorities into this, the secret would be out. Theodore's solitary mission would become something public, scrutinized, official, but it was the right thing to do. Theodore had protected these pieces for decades. Now it was time to return them. "We're doing this," Evan said. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "We are." That night, back at Evan's apartment, they prepared for the call with Dr. Chen. They organized their documentation, rehearsed what they'd say, thought through every question she might ask. But mostly, they talked about Theodore, about the sacrifice he'd made, the loneliness he'd endured, the integrity that had driven his entire life. "I don't want to end up like that," Marcus said quietly. "Alone, cut off from everyone. You won't, because we're doing this together. And when it's done, we'll still have each other." Marcus nodded. "Promise?" "Promise." Outside, Maine autumn was turning toward winter. Inside, father and son planned how to honor a dead man's trust and finish a mission that had waited 70 years for completion. Some inheritances were measured in money. This one was measured in something far more valuable: truth, justice, memory, and the chance to make things right. The phone call with Dr. Sarah Chen changed everything. Sunday morning, Evan and Marcus sat at the kitchen table, phone on speaker between them. Marcus had set up recording software on his laptop for legal protection, he'd said, and Evan agreed. Everything needed to be transparent from here on out. "Doctor." Chen's voice was professional but warm, carrying the slight accent of someone who'd grown up speaking multiple languages. "Thank you for reaching out. Before we begin, I need to establish some baseline credibility. Can you tell me how you came into possession of this information?" Evan explained Theodore's death, the inheritance, the submarine, the discovered documents. He kept it factual, chronological, withholding the most sensitive details until he felt confident in her integrity. "Captain Theodore Marks," Dr. Chen repeated thoughtfully. "I've heard that name before. Give me a moment." They heard typing, then a sharp intake of breath. "Yes, here. There's a reference in declassified OSS documents from 1954. An investigation into missing recovered artwork." Captain Marks was questioned, but never charged. The file notes that he refused to cooperate, and the investigation was dropped due to lack of evidence. "He wasn't stealing," Marcus said quickly. "He was protecting them." "I'm beginning to believe that might be true. Can you share any of the documentation you've found?" Evan sent selected photos, Theodore's provenance files, the list of artworks, but not images of the pieces themselves yet. They waited while Dr. Chen reviewed them. Her silence stretched for several minutes. When she spoke again, her voice shook slightly. "If this is authentic, and these files certainly appear to be, this is one of the most significant discoveries in restitution history. The Rosenberg Raphael alone has been on our most wanted list for decades. We assumed it was destroyed." "It's not destroyed," Evan said. "It's preserved, along with several other pieces." "Where are they now?" Evan hesitated. still in the locations where Theodore secured them. We haven't moved anything. We wanted expert guidance first. That was wise. Dr. Chen's tone shifted to something more urgent. Listen carefully. This needs to be handled with extreme care. We need to involve the proper authorities, FBI Art Crime Team, International Cultural Ministries, authentication experts. But I give you my word that my only interest is ensuring these pieces reach their rightful homes. Theodore tried working with authorities, Marcus said. They threatened to prosecute him. That was a different era. The laws around cultural property have evolved significantly. There are international treaties now, dedicated organizations, transparency requirements. She paused. I understand your hesitation, but I promise you I will personally ensure this is done right. These families deserve justice. Something in her voice convinced Evan. Not just professionalism, but genuine passion. This wasn't just a job to her. What happens next? He asked. I come to Maine. You show me the submarine, the documentation. We verify authenticity together. Then we bring in the necessary authorities and begin the process of authentication and restitution. Her voice softened. Your great-uncle did something extraordinary. Let's honor that by finishing his work properly. They agreed she'd arrive Tuesday. That gave Evan and Marcus one day to prepare, to organize everything, to ready themselves for what came next. After the call ended, they sat in silence. We're really doing this, Marcus said. Yeah, we are. What if something goes wrong? What if the wrong people get involved? Then we fight, the right way. Legally, publicly, transparently. Evan looked at his son. But I think we can trust her. The next day brought complications. Ron called Evan into his office first thing Monday morning. We need to talk about your attendance, Ron said, his expression serious. You've missed more days in the last month than in the previous decade. What's going on? Evan had prepared for this conversation, but still struggled with how much to reveal. Family situation. It's complicated, but it's important. More important than your job? The question hung in the air. A month ago, Evan would have immediately said no, would have apologized and promised to refocus. But now, with Marcus waiting at home, with Theodore's mission unfolding, with something that actually mattered demanding his attention, the answer wasn't as simple. It's important, Evan repeated. Ron studied him for a long moment. I'm going to be straight with you. You're a good worker, Marks, one of the best I've got, but I can't keep covering for you. Take the rest of this week as unpaid leave. Figure out whatever you need to figure out. But when you come back, I need the old Evan, the reliable one. Otherwise, we're going to have a different conversation. It was fair. More than fair, actually, but it still stung. Evan had spent 26 years building a reputation for reliability, and now he was risking it for a mystery and a mission he still barely understood. But when he got home and found Marcus surrounded by research materials, so engaged and alive in a way he hadn't been in years, Evan knew he'd made the right choice. They spent Monday preparing. Marcus created a comprehensive digital archive of everything they'd found. Evan wrote a detailed timeline of Theodore's life and their discoveries. Together they drafted a plan for how to approach the third location in Nova Scotia. They'd need to visit it before bringing in authorities to ensure all 3 sites were accounted for. Laura called that evening. Marcus was supposed to go back to her house, but he asked to stay through the week. What's going on? Laura asked when Evan called to explain. Marcus is being secretive, and you've both been acting strange. We're working on something together. Something important. Does this have to do with your uncle's submarine? Yeah, it's bigger than we expected. Laura was quiet. Then, he's different. Marcus, I mean. He actually seems happy, engaged with something. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Theodore, the decades of isolation, the weight of secrets carried alone. The old man had trusted Evan with his life's work, believing he'd see it through. But there was doubt too. What if they made mistakes? What if involving authorities led to the pieces being seized, locked in storage, forgotten in bureaucracy? What if corrupt officials still existed, still looked for ways to profit from war's tragedy? Around 2 in the morning, Evan got up and drove to Cutter's Point. He needed to see the submarine one more time before everything changed. Inside the captain's quarters, by flashlight, he found Theodore's final journal, the one he'd discovered weeks ago. He read through it again, slowly this time, looking for guidance. The final entry stopped him. "If you're reading this, Evan, then you've come far enough to deserve the truth. I was alone by choice, but loneliness was the price. Don't make my mistake. Use this journey to build connection, not isolation. The art matters. Yes, but your son matters more. Let this mission bring you together, not drive you apart. You are capable of more than you know. I see in you what you cannot yet see in yourself. Courage, integrity, and a heart that refuses to harden. Finish what I started, but do it your way, with people who love you by your side. That is the treasure I could never find." Evan sat in the darkness, Theodore's words echoing in his mind. The old man hadn't just left him artwork to protect. He'd left him a path to healing, to connection, to becoming the father Marcus needed. Tuesday morning, Dr. Chen would arrive. The mission would become official, would move beyond just father and son working together in secret. But that was okay, because they'd already found what mattered most. Evan locked up the submarine and drove home as dawn broke over the Atlantic. Marcus was still asleep on the couch, research papers scattered around him. Evan covered him with a blanket and made coffee, watching the sun rise over Port Salem. Whatever came next, authorities, authentication, restitution, they'd face it together. Theodore had carried his burden alone for 70 years. Evan didn't have to do the same. Some treasures were meant to be shared. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at noon on Tuesday, driving a practical Honda sedan with Massachusetts plates. She was younger than Evan expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an air of quiet competence. She shook both their hands firmly. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she said. "I know how difficult that must be." They drove to Cutter's Point in convoy, Dr. Chen following Evan's truck. Marcus rode beside his father, nervous energy making him fidget with the folder of documents they'd prepared. "What if she doesn't believe us?" Marcus asked. "She will. The evidence speaks for itself." The submarine looked different with a stranger present. More real somehow, less like their private discovery. "Doctor." Chen walked around the exterior slowly, taking photographs, examining the hull with professional interest. "Remarkable preservation," she said. "Your uncle maintained this well." Inside, she moved through the spaces with reverence, pausing to read labels, examine equipment, absorb the history contained in every corner. When they reached the captain's quarters and Evan showed her Theodore's navigation log, her hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages. "This is extraordinary," she breathed. "Primary source documentation from someone directly involved in recovery operations." She looked up at Evan. "Do you understand what you have here? This isn't just about the artwork. This is historical record, testimony, evidence of what happened during and after the war." They showed her everything, the letters from Theodore's crew, the provenance files, the photographs of the documents they'd found at Pemaquid Point. Dr. Chen took notes rapidly, asking sharp questions, cross-referencing details with databases on her tablet. "The Rosenberg Raphael," she said finally. "If it's authentic, this alone would be worth—" She stopped herself. "But that's not what matters. What matters is that Sarah Rosenberg had a daughter. Who had children? There are living descendants who've spent their entire lives wondering what happened to their family's heritage." Marcus leaned forward. "You know them? I've been in contact with the family for years. They submitted a claim through our organization, providing documentation of ownership, photographs of the painting hanging in their Vienna apartment before the war. We've been searching for decades. Her voice caught. We assumed it was lost forever. We need to see it, Evan said. The actual painting. Before we go further, we need to verify it's still there and intact. Dr. Chen nodded. Agreed. The island is accessible now. We can leave today, if you're willing. She didn't hesitate. Let's go. The trip to Bar Harbor took 3 hours. They rented the same motorboat Evan and Marcus had used before, though this time Dr. Chen insisted on hiring an experienced captain, a weathered local named Tom, who knew the waters and asked no questions beyond the basics. The crossing was smoother than Evan's previous attempt. Tom handled the boat with easy competence, navigating swells and currents, while Dr. Chen sat in the stern, reviewing documentation on her tablet. The island looked the same, rocky, overgrown, untouched. They pulled onto the narrow beach and secured the boat. Tom agreed to wait, settling in with a thermos of coffee and a well-worn paperback. The hike to the chamber felt different with 3 of them. Dr. Chen moved carefully but determinedly, not complaining when brambles caught her jacket or mud slicked the path. When they reached the stone marker with Edith Marks's initials, she photographed it extensively. Your uncle was meticulous, she said. Everything documented, everything preserved with care. The steel door opened with the combination they'd used before. Inside, Dr. Chen stood for a long moment, taking in the chamber, the climate control equipment, the massive titanium container in the center. Theodore built this, Evan said, or had it built, maintaining it for 70 years. The dedication, Dr. Chen whispered, the absolute commitment to this mission. Together, the 3 of them lifted the container's lid. Dr. Chen pulled on cotton gloves before unwrapping the first item. When the Raphael emerged from its protective layers, she gasped, actually gasped, hand flying to her mouth, tears immediately streaming down her face. Oh my God, she said. Oh my God, it's real. It's actually real. The painting seemed to glow in their flashlight beams. The Madonna's face was serene, timeless, rendered with a master's hand. Colors that should have faded remained vivid. Details that shouldn't have survived were perfect. Dr. Chen examined it closely, pulling out a jeweler's loupe, studying brushstrokes and canvas texture. The signature is here. The style is unmistakable. This is... She had to stop, overwhelmed. This is the Rosenberg Raphael. I'm certain. She photographed it from every angle, documenting condition, taking detailed notes. Then she carefully examined the other pieces, the Vermeer, the bronze sculpture, each item Theodore had protected. Everything's authentic, she said finally. Everything's in remarkable condition. Your uncle knew what he was doing. Professional-level conservation. Marcus asked the question Evan was thinking. What happens now? Dr. Chen sat back on her heels, wiping her eyes. Now we protect this site while I make calls. FBI art crime team needs to be notified. International authorities. The families. She looked at Evan and Marcus seriously. Once I make those calls, this becomes official. Public. There will be investigations, authentication processes, legal proceedings. Are you ready for that? Evan thought about Theodore, about the decades of silence, the loneliness, the burden carried alone. Then he looked at Marcus beside him, engaged and present, and finally connected. We're ready, Evan said, but we do this on our terms. Everything transparent, everything documented. The families come first. Agreed. Dr. Chen pulled out her phone, checking for signal. I'll need to get back to the mainland to make the calls, but I want both of you there when I do. You're part of this story now. You deserve to see it through. They resealed the container and secured the chamber. Walking back to the boat, Dr. Chen talked about next steps, authentication experts she trusted, lawyers who specialized in restitution, family representatives who needed to be contacted. But mostly she talked about the Rosenberg descendants, about a grandmother who'd never stopped searching for her family's lost heritage, about children who'd grown up hearing stories of the beautiful painting that once hung in their great-grandparents' home. "You're giving them back more than art, Doctor," Chen said. "You're giving them back memory, connection to ancestors they never knew, proof that their family mattered, that their loss mattered." On the boat ride back, Marcus asked, "Do you think Theodore knew that we'd find someone like Dr. Chen, that we'd be able to finish this?" Evan thought about the final journal entry, about Theodore's faith in him, his hope that Evan would do it right. "I think he believed in possibility," Evan said. "Even when he couldn't see the path forward, he believed someone eventually would." The mainland came into view, solid and real. Behind them the island held its secrets for a little while longer, but soon, very soon, those secrets would emerge into light, and families who'd waited 70 years would finally find what they'd lost. Dr. Chen made the first call from Evan's apartment that evening. They sat around the small kitchen table, Evan, Marcus, and Dr. Chen, with her phone on speaker. The FBI art crime team agent who answered was professional but skeptical until Dr. Chen mentioned the Rosenberg Raphael. Then his tone shifted dramatically. "That piece has been on our top 10 most wanted list since 1947, Agent David Morrison said. "If you're telling me it's been located, we need to move on this immediately." "I've seen it personally, Doctor," Chen confirmed, along with several other pieces documented in Captain Theodore Marx's records. "Everything is secured, preserved, and ready for official authentication." "Where is it?" Dr. Chen looked at Evan, who nodded. "A secure location off the coast of Maine. The exact coordinates can be provided once we have guarantees about the restitution process." "Dr. Chen, you know we can't make promises about final disposition before authentication and legal review." "I know the law, Agent Morrison. I also know these pieces have rightful owners who've been searching for decades. I need your assurance that this will be handled properly. That profit won't supersede justice." There was a pause. "You have my word, and I'll personally oversee the process. When can we examine the works?" They arranged for a team to arrive in 2 days. Authentication experts, federal agents, legal representatives, a full official response. Dr. Chen also contacted international agencies, cultural ministries, and most importantly, the families. The call to the Rosenberg descendant was the hardest to witness. The woman who answered was elderly, her voice carrying the weight of years. "This is Ruth Goldstein. Who's calling?" "Mrs. Goldstein, my name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I work with the Holocaust Restitution Project. I have news about your family's Raphael painting." Silence. Then, "We were told it was destroyed. 70 years ago, they told us it was gone." "It wasn't destroyed, Mrs. Goldstein. It was preserved, hidden by a man who spent his life protecting it, waiting for the right time to return it." The sound that came through the phone was something between a sob and a laugh. "After all this time, my mother searched until she died. She never stopped believing we'd find it." "Your mother was right," Dr. Chen said gently. "The painting survived, and it's coming home to your family." Ruth Goldstein wept openly. In the background, they could hear others gathering, voices asking what was happening, the news spreading through the household, 3 generations learning that something precious, something they'd mourned as lost forever, had been found. "Who preserved it?" Ruth finally asked. "Who kept it safe?" Dr. Chen looked at Evan. "A Navy captain named Theodore Marx. He recovered it after the war and guarded it for the rest of his life." Can we thank him?" "He passed away recently, but his great-nephew is here. He's the one who found everything and made sure it reached the right people." Ruth's voice strengthened. "Then please, tell him. Tell him our family will never forget what his uncle did, what he's done. He gave us back more than a painting. He gave us back our history. After the call ended, none of them could speak for several minutes. Marcus had tears streaming down his face. Evan felt something tight in his chest, an emotion too big to name. "That's why we do this," Dr. Chen said quietly. "That moment, that restoration of what was stolen." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Federal agents arrived and set up a command post. Authentication experts flew in from New York and Boston. Legal representatives began drafting restitution agreements. The small island that had been Evan and Marcus's secret became the center of an international operation. The media got wind of the story somehow. News vans appeared in Port Salem, reporters asking questions, cameras everywhere. Evan refused most interviews, but Dr. Chen handled the attention with practiced skill, always redirecting focus to the families, to Theodore's sacrifice, to the importance of restitution. Claire called, shocked and somewhat embarrassed. "You actually found something valuable in that rusted submarine?" "I found something important," Evan corrected. "There's a difference." David called too, more thoughtful. "I misjudged Uncle Theodore. Misjudged you too, if I'm honest. What you're doing, it matters." On Thursday, the official authentication took place. A team of experts examined each piece under controlled conditions, running tests, comparing documentation, verifying provenance. Every item was confirmed authentic. Every piece of Theodore's meticulous record-keeping proved accurate. Agent Morrison approached Evan afterward. "Your uncle could have sold these, made millions. Why didn't he?" Evan thought about Theodore's final journal entry, about choosing preservation over profit, integrity over gain. "Because some things aren't for sale," Evan said. "Some things belong to the people they were stolen from." He understood that. The Raphael was the first piece released for restitution. Under heavy security, it was transported to New York, where the Goldstein family would receive it in a formal ceremony. Dr. Chen invited Evan and Marcus to attend. They flew down on Saturday, Evan's first time on a plane in a decade, Marcus's first time ever. The ceremony was held at a museum, cameras and dignitaries everywhere, but Evan only had eyes for Ruth Goldstein. She was 92, small and frail, supported by family members on either side. When the painting was unveiled, when she saw the Madonna and child her mother had described to her as a child, she reached out with trembling hands. "I remember," she whispered. "Mama showed me photographs, told me stories, said it was the most beautiful thing in our home." She looked at Evan through tears. "Thank you. Thank your uncle. Tell him we remember. We'll always remember." Evan shook her hand gently. "He knew your names, every family, every person who lost something. You all mattered to him. Then he mattered to us," Ruth said firmly, "and always will." That night, back at the hotel, Marcus asked the question that had been building since the ceremony. "Dad, what do we do now? After all this is done?" Evan looked at his son, no longer the sullen, withdrawn teenager he'd been picking up for awkward dinners. This was someone engaged with the world, someone who'd found purpose in something larger than himself. "We keep going," Evan said. "Together, whatever comes next, we face it as a team." Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." 2 more pieces remained to be authenticated and returned. The work would continue for months, maybe years, but the hardest part was done. They'd honored Theodore's trust. They'd finished what he started, and in the process, they'd found each other again. 3 months later, autumn had turned to winter in coastal Maine. Snow dusted the rocky beach at Cutter's Point, and the ocean churned grey and restless beyond the preserved submarine Persephone. Evan stood before the vessel, watching workers install the final piece of the memorial project. A bronze plaque, newly cast, mounted beside the hull door. The inscription read, "Captain Theodore Marks, Guardian of Memory, 1000 922 to 2025. Some treasures are worth a lifetime of silence. The submarine had been granted historical landmark status, transformed from a forgotten relic into an educational site. Inside, carefully curated exhibits told Theodore's story, the monument's men, art, restitution, the families whose heritage he'd protected. Photographs of the recovered works lined the walls, along with documentation of their return to rightful owners. Dr. Chen had overseen the project, ensuring everything honored Theodore's memory while educating visitors about cultural preservation. The first public opening was scheduled for this afternoon, a small ceremony with local officials, historians, and some of the families Theodore had helped. Claire and David stood nearby, finally understanding the magnitude of what their eccentric uncle had accomplished. Claire had apologized multiple times for her initial mockery, and David had contributed funding to the memorial project. "I wish I'd known him better," David said quietly. "Really known him. He was private," Evan said. "But he was also extraordinary, and now people will understand that." Laura arrived with Marcus, who'd driven up from Port Salem High. The kid looked different these days, more confident, more engaged with the world. His grades had improved dramatically. He joined the school's history club and was working on a research project about World War II art recovery. "Ready for your speech?" Laura asked Evan. He nodded, though nervousness fluttered in his stomach. Public speaking had never been his strength, but Dr. Chen had insisted he say something at the ceremony. The small crowd gathered as the afternoon light slanted across the snow. Maybe 50 people, officials, historians, reporters, and most importantly, Ruth Goldstein and her family, who'd flown from New York to attend. Dr. Chen introduced Evan, her words generous and warm. Then he stepped forward, his prepared notes in his pocket but unused. Some things needed to come from the heart. "My great-uncle Theodore was a private man," Evan began. "I barely knew him when I was growing up. Just a quiet figure at the edges of family gatherings, someone who seemed content to observe rather than participate. When he left me this submarine, I thought it was a strange gift, maybe even a burden." He looked at the vessel behind him. "But Theodore knew something I didn't. He knew that some gifts take time to understand. That, looking beneath the surface, reveals truths you'd miss if you only saw what was obvious. This submarine held his life's work, protecting artwork stolen from families destroyed by war. He spent 70 years alone, guarding these pieces, waiting for the right time to return them. Most people would call that sacrifice. Theodore would have called it duty." Ruth Goldstein nodded, tears on her weathered cheeks. "But he left me more than artwork to protect," Evan continued. "He left me a path back to my son, a way to connect through shared purpose, through something that mattered beyond our own small struggles. That was the real treasure." Marcus smiled at him from the crowd. "So this memorial isn't just about the past, it's about what we choose to preserve for the future. Memory, integrity, the belief that some things are worth protecting even when no one's watching. Theodore embodied those values, and now we honor them." The crowd applauded. Ruth Goldstein approached afterward, taking Evan's hands in her thin, strong grip. "Your uncle returned more than a painting to my family," she said. "He returned our dignity, our history, the knowledge that what was stolen from us mattered enough for someone to spend his life protecting it." She pressed something into Evan's palm, a small photograph. "This was taken in Vienna, 1937. My grandmother standing in front of the Raphael in their home. I want you to have it, so you remember what Theodore saved." Evan looked at the faded photograph, a young woman in an elegant dress, smiling in front of the masterpiece that would soon be stolen, her family soon to be destroyed, and Theodore had brought it back. "Thank you," Evan whispered. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of the plaque. Cameras flashed, dignitaries made brief remarks, and then slowly the crowd dispersed, leaving Evan and Marcus alone by the submarine. "Want to take a walk inside?" Marcus asked. "One more time before they open it to the public?" They entered together, their footsteps echoing in the familiar space. The exhibits were finished now, everything professionally displayed and lit. But the captain's quarters remained mostly unchanged. Theodore's desk, his books, the narrow bed where he'd spent countless nights. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, "about college, about what I want to study." "Yeah? Art history, maybe cultural preservation. What Dr. Chen does, helping families find what they've lost. That feels important." Evan felt pride swell in his chest. Theodore would have liked that. "What about you? What happens now?" Evan had been thinking about that question for weeks. The shipyard had taken him back after his leave, but something had shifted. He'd seen what mattered, what was possible when you committed to something beyond just getting by. "I'm going back to school," he said. "Architecture, like I wanted when I was young. Maybe it's not too late to build things that last." "It's not too late," Marcus said firmly. "It's never too late." They stood in the captain's quarters, surrounded by Theodore's legacy, and Evan understood finally what his great-uncle had tried to tell him. Looking deeper didn't just mean uncovering secrets. It meant seeing potential where others saw rust, finding connection where others saw distance, believing in second chances even when they seemed impossible. The submarine had been Theodore's refuge, his workshop, his mission control for a 70-year operation. Now it would be something else, a memorial, yes, but also a reminder that one person's integrity could ripple across generations. Evan and Marcus locked up the submarine together and stood in the winter afternoon, watching snow fall over the Atlantic. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said. "Everyone thought the submarine was worthless, just junk on a beach. And they were wrong," Evan said. "About a lot of things." His phone buzzed a text from Laura. "Dinner tonight? All three of us? Marcus says you've been working too hard." Evan smiled and typed back, "Sounds perfect." Some inheritances were measured in money, some in land or possessions. Theodore's inheritance had been measured in trust, in the belief that Evan would see what others missed, that he'd value what couldn't be bought or sold. And he had. In finding Theodore's treasures, Evan had found something more valuable, a relationship with his son that had been slipping away, a sense of purpose that transcended daily struggles, proof that it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. The submarine Persephone sat solid against the winter landscape, no longer forgotten, no longer just a rusted hull on a lonely beach. It was a monument now, a story, a testament to one man's quiet courage and another man's willingness to look deeper. Some treasures were worth a lifetime of silence. Others were worth breaking that silence to share. Theodore had known the difference, and so, finally, did Evan.